Well, welcome to the second session of Healthy People Leaving Healthy Churches. Last week, Terry gave an excellent presentation about the seven characteristics or values of people in the first half adulthood season of human development and how churches often reflect those values. This week, Terry will discuss 7 characteristics of those people who find themselves in the half-adolescence or second half adulthood stage of human development and how they can find support and community. Please silence your cell phones.
Thank you. Thank you. I got to say, first of all, it was amazing because when I share this kind of thing with I'll call it a normal group, there's so much pushback. It's like in this group, it's like there's so much resonance. It doesn't mean you agree with everything. I understand that, but HASP is a unique group or within. I mean, I have some close friends and family members that would call us liberal elites and all those other names kind of things, but there is a resonance here that's unusual with the second half of life and how we approach our growth and just us being here, first of all, just says we are passionate about continued human development. We want to not only keep learning about things, we want to keep being changed, be it through thinking about churches or Enneagram, which I'm taking also. And I took the profile and looked at it and hated it. So it's kind of like, oh, there must be something I can learn here. There's a shadow part of me that doesn't like what it's saying about me. So I love that because that just means there's something going on in my life that I can still focus on. Well, we're going to dig into session 2. I probably have enough for about 3 sessions, so we'll dig in. First of all, a review, just to get our context back again. For 20 years, people 25 years and older, now we're dropped out of church life every day. 6,246 walked out of church doors and didn't go back in every day for 20 years. Among those, 1,233 were 57 years and over. So when my wife Anita and I walked away from churches a number of years ago, we didn't walk out alone. We walked out with 1,233. And there were several of us that visit churches. We visited churches in Southern Cal. We visited churches all the way from more traditional Reform to Unitarian Universalist. We've tried all different churches and we try them for a little while and it's difficult. And plus I have an addiction. I have an addiction to ministry. So sometimes I join a church, like we joined at Hope for a while, and after a while was on the building committee and the education committee and the worship committee and everything else. And it's like I was digging back into first half again. Did the same thing at a little startup church, the Ark, it was called, in Zealand. We just visited and wanted to be real quiet. And then after a while, I was the interim pastor. So I know that's unique to me, but maybe someday I won't be so addicted. For me, stepping into a church is like stepping into a whirlpool, or more graphically, jumping into a toilet and somebody flushes it, because I just know I'm going to get sucked into that kind of thing. So that's my own unique challenge. But many older people, the demographic pretty close to HASP, are still leaving every day. As we explore these potential troubling statistics, in this class, we're not looking for what's wrong. We're looking for what's right. What is a church doing right? What does it mean that it's a healthy, vital church? And what about the health and the positive aspects of those of us who have left or are leaving or are thinking about leaving or maybe have moved to the margins? I'm not sure when you've left a church. Sometimes you can move so far to the margins that you're hardly there, but you're just there maybe for kids or whatever. We're not looking for things to fix. Instead, we're looking for things to build on and expand from. We're talking about 5 seasons of growth. And I propose that culture, churches recognize and live into 3 of those: childhood, adolescence, and first half adulthood. And there are many churches that do very, very well in those 3. But there are 2 more seasons that 10 to 20% of us are living into. Half-adolescence, which is another olescence, another transition time, and then second half adulthood. So review from this was the end of last session, that there's a boundary, there's a psychological boundary or fence or whatever that helps us function when we're younger adults. There was an experiment, a well-known experiment in psychological areas, that what they did is they had a school and they didn't have any fence around it. So the kids went out and played, and without a fence, the kids stayed close to the school. They didn't explore much. Then they put a fence up, and guess where the kids were? All at the fence, complaining that there was a fence. But they played over the whole area. So in a sense, I see these 7 characteristics of the first half as giving us some safety, giving us a way to function. Because frankly, coming out of high school or college is scary enough without having some sort of framework for it. So it's like this, for me, is a gracious, if you will, God-given boundary that helps us to function. Makes life doable for first half younger adults. It enables their growth, transformation, and human development. Enables them, people grow like crazy in the first half. Think about somebody coming fresh out of college and then somebody in midlife. They've learned skills, they've developed, they have a basic picture of what the world is like. We did. Helps form healthy families, communities, and nations. It really does build stuff that I appreciate, and helps human vessels prepared for expansion into the second half adulthood. There's one author that says first half adulthood, really the purpose of that is to create a vessel to hold second half life. So first we build this, then we build that. Ken Wilber talks about many of the characteristics we'll talk about today. The expansions might feel sometimes a little bit like youthful rebellion, or youthful type stepping out from the norms and so on, except that's all pre. Right now, we're in post. We've lived into first half. Somebody said you need to know how to live. You need to know the rules properly. So you need to know the rules well enough so you can break them properly. So first, we create a foundation. We know what's right from wrong. We know convention. We've aspired. We've done all these things. Then we're ready to break beyond it. Okay, today we're looking at loss of resonance between healthy, growing second half people and healthy, thriving first half churches. We'll dig into that next. 7 expansions of second half adults that prompt the loss of resonance with first half churches. We lose resonance. That doesn't mean we have to hate churches or get repelled. That doesn't even mean always dissonance. There's a difference between loss of resonance and dissonance. Loss of resonance would be like in music, you hear something, you just don't resonate with it. Dissonance for me is rap. That is, I don't get it. Or we go to MVP to exercise and they play some of that music and it rasps for me. It does not to others, but it does for me. So sometimes there's not dissonance between us and churches, though there can be. It's just we've lost resonance. So the 7 expansions are propensities of second half adults beyond the understanding and appreciation and support of first half adults in churches. You'll see those 3 words quite frequently. Understanding, appreciation, and support. It's not that, say, a younger first half pastor just refuses to appreciate where we are as second half adults. They cannot. They cannot, because they haven't reached that stage of development yet. They might catch glimpses. They might read in a book. When Anita and I led a fellowship class in a mega church, the rule was that people needed to be younger than the average of our age, which I didn't know why, because it was called young couples or youples, young couples at that point, but it made developmental sense because Anita and I had been through that process. And for us to try to mentor or care for people that were in their 70s or 80s didn't quite make sense. So we'll use those words a lot. The 7 expansions are synthesized from the testimonies, surveys, and studies of those who have actually experienced human development into the second half of life. And they've been called all kinds of names. So for those of you in the second half, I could call you a mystic, a sage, elder, guru. Some would call you a wizard, witch, or a heretic in certain cultures. Maslow would call you self-actualized. So all these different names, and that's part of the challenge. Why don't we have language for it? Because the language is so confusing. But increasingly, that bottom right, second half adults is becoming more and more popular, partially because people like Carl Jung started using it, and Hollis and Rohr. So it's becoming more popular. So it's not that they're different from each other, they're surprisingly similar. And where did I come up with these 7 descriptors? Well, I reviewed hundreds of sources, literally. Studies, surveys, peer-reviewed articles, and so on. And I came up with over 100 descriptions of the way people experienced second half adulthood. Just listed them all down. You could tell how much time I had in retirement. And I'm a learner. I just love exploring these things. But as I studied those 100+ descriptions, I recognized they were quite often talking about the same thing. So rather than 100, I narrowed them down to 7. I probably could have narrowed them down to 12 or 5, but 7 was a good biblical number, so I figured we'll go with 7. We'll 7. And here they are, and I call it trans. Builds on first half. We begin, for example, with first half either or certainty, and then we expand into second half trans. Now, trans is a word that's been hijacked quite a bit recently, so I will put this definition to the side quite often. Trans simply means to the other side of. So we've experienced the first half version of it, and then we move beyond it. We transcend it, we expand, enlarge, we mature that characteristic. We add to it, we supplement. So it means we're first this, then we expand into the beyond it. And that half adolescence is kind of that borderline where you have all these questions and you're wondering what's going on unless somebody takes your hand and says, "Oh, wonderful, you're a half adolescent." Otherwise, it's very easy to think, what's wrong with me? Why do I sit here and say, we believe in God the Father Almighty and so on, and listen to that and go, where did that come from? Am I becoming a heretic? Am I losing my faith? Or we share something in a small group. I remember visiting a small group in California that we'd started decades before. This is really right near Easter. And Mary, one of the participants in that group, just said to this group of, 10 people or 12 people, I wonder whether Jesus really physically arose from the dead or not. I wonder if that's important. All of a sudden, there was no air in the room. And she was just sharing a question. She didn't mean she believed it or not. She was just querying, wondering, which has been a theme throughout history, by the way. Was that a metaphor? Or was it real? Is it physically? And she just asked the question. Or we belong to Mars Hill. Resonated a long time with Rob Bell. Rob Bell had the capacity to reach across seasons until he asked a few too many questions. And the powerful, wealthy people there and some of the leadership, soon he was gone because he just asked too many questions. That's the half adolescence. He didn't leave church, he was asked to leave church. So these expansions are perennial characteristics of growth into a second half experience. Perennial means they're persistent, they're enduring. It grows across cultures, across the centuries. I read articles from people from 300, 400, 500, 1,000, more than 1,000 years ago. They talked about these popping up in their life without interruption, regularly repeated. So if I see any of you nodding your head to one of these, I'll say, regularly repeated. Whether you lived in Southern California or lived here the whole time or grew up Reformed, Christian Reformed, Presbyterian, maybe unchurched, still, yes, they're perennial. Look at them one at a time. Expansion 1, beyond either or certainty into trans certainty. And notice that I have arrows going both ways. It doesn't say we leave certainty. It says that we expand into beyond it. We don't become uncertain, but we become trans certain. Let's look at that. Well, first half adults, we live with a natural propensity, a natural draw to either or certainty. Some people would call it simplified certainty. Is a person good or bad? I don't know of anybody who's all good and all bad. Some people might come close, but all good or all bad. You know, I feel like I have a lot of good, but I also have shadow. So it's both. It's complexified. It's not so clear. We prefer to define and know things as clearly as possible. We sort pretty much everything into up or down, with us or against us, right or wrong, holy or not holy, saved or not saved. We live with as much certainty as we can conjure, and we postpone or put aside the negative, problematic. Then in half-adolescence and beyond, we first suspect, then come to realize that, and this is a quote that I live with a lot, that life is much riskier, more powerful, more mysterious than we had ever thought possible. The world is more magical. That's an interesting term, isn't it? The world is more magical, less predictable, more autonomous, less controllable, more varied, less simple, more infinite, less knowable, more wonderfully troubling than we could have imagined being able to tolerate when we were younger. Does that resonate someplace? You say things are not so clear. Things are not that simple. Things are messier than that, especially as we start going internal and start seeing ourselves and exploring ourselves. That's from James Hollis. It's not that we reject certainty. It's not that we leave it and say, I'm uncertain about everything now. No, instead we expand into trancertainty. Our certainties expand into more of a fluid and shifting form of certainty. I thought about all the different things that happen in my certainty. We are no longer certain of some things, certain of other things. Things that I was certain of before, I'm not certain of at all. But other things that I was not certain of, I am certain of. Less certain of most things. I hold things more loosely. For me, that's one of the characteristics of the second half, that it's easier to say, I don't know, or I wonder. I have questions about that. We're less certain of most things, less drawn to simplified certainty, more open to, drawn to, and delighted by messy mystery, unknowns, paradox, and both ends. I love reading about that. Just how things are messy, how to complexify them. I'm drawn to that. We hold firm certainties, complexified certainties, and uncertainties at the same time. So a first reason we lose resonance with first half churches. This is adapting that James Hollis. As second half adults, we see life, including spiritual life, as much riskier, more powerful, more mysterious, as less predictable, more autonomous, less controllable, more varied, less simple, more infinite, less knowable, more wonderfully troubling than church leaders and members can imagine, understand, appreciate, and support. Church folks in the first half are still needing certainty. Creeds and confessions are very important to them, and they can't understand. In short, expansion one adds a rich field of question marks and exclamation points. So we say, wow, or I wonder. And silence adds rich silence. And this is almost certain to cause loss of resonance, unease, and tension with certainty-oriented first half church participants. By the way, as well as with family members, friends, and colleagues. It's not just churches that we're talking about being stressed. It's also put together a family with second half adults and first half adults. There are increasing numbers of topics you can't talk about. And even within our family, when we get together, there are some things we don't talk about. It's not so much because we disagree, whether it's right or wrong. We talk a different language. So why are many healthy, growing people leaving healthy, thriving churches? Certain adults no longer fit as they once did in their either or certainty-oriented churches. Our values, perspectives, and beliefs complexify beyond the capacity of churches, their leaders, and members to be able to tolerate. As soon as we say, I wonder about that, or I don't know about that. I remember talking to a young pastor that actually one of the pastors that I worked with before printed out a card called your ticket to heaven, he called it. And if you signed the one side, you put that ticket in your wallet. So when you died, you could present it because they signed a certain confession. That means that person, that is salvation by confession. And then my questions come in. What about James chapter 1? You know, show them, you say it, show it by your life, or the parable of the sheep and goats, where it's based upon how you treat other people. What about this? What about that? I just messed up his card. It wasn't well received. Let's just say that. So in response, we have choices. We can resist and question. They can, second half adults can resist and question their development and say, okay, I'm not going to go there anymore. And I think there is quite a bit of that has happened in the past, especially in parish churches, where everybody from your community belonged to that same church. You just squash the questions. You don't ask them. You don't go there. You hide your development. You can openly live in churches as healthy, growing misfits and say, I don't see things the way you do, and know you're a misfit. Quietly move to the margins, kind of just attend, maybe come to the service late, sit kind of at the side, and then leave a little bit early, or leave even healthy, thriving first half churches. I think about things differently than churches do. Then second half, transconventional. And by the way, these are often similar, but transconventional. While first half adults, we live with a natural propensity to belong and fit in. Therefore, even if it takes great sacrifice and a lot of work, we learn to be dependable, reliable, responsible, and conscientious. That could be in a career life. It could be certainly in churches. We need to belong. How should I live to fit in and be acceptable? What should I say? What should I confess? What are the proper values, perspectives, and beliefs to hold? We need to fit in. We don't want to be this. We have a natural propensity against becoming this in the first half. It's very important to belong. And in career, it's very important to not look like this because it affects salary and reviews and continued employment. And when I became a pastor in my ordination, I promised to uphold the theology and the practices of the Reformed Church in America. When I became part of staff with the Crystal Cathedral, I promised to support the perspectives and policies and practices of Robert Schuller. So just part of it. You needed to, and if I became identified as this chick, tough. In the first half, it's important to us. Then in half adolescence and beyond, we gain a capacity to ask basic questions about our quote unquote conventions. It's like, yeah, we keep saying this, but I wonder if that's right. I wonder if maybe we're not always on the right side. We loosen our grip on the values, perspectives, and so on that we adopted from important influencers in our life. And we often adopt them with little questioning because we join a church and we start confessing, or we sing the songs, and we can explore other ways and learn from those with other conventions. I just knew that there was no way I could be in a first half church and quote writings from other faith systems. I remember when I was still first half, I was looking for somebody to become our minister to children. And there was a candidate who was very, very strong in virtually every way. But I watched a tape of him reading. This was at Fountain Street. He was at Fountain Street. I listened to what he was saying, and he read something from the Quran. I eliminated him as a candidate because that was on the wrong side. Convention would not allow it. Now I look at it and say, I wonder what he was reading. I wonder how it resonated, what that faith system had discovered. So we can explore other ways. We learn to accept life as a misfit, activist, and innovator. So it's not that we stand apart or rebel. That's what happened when I was in college here at Hope and became an atheist. You know, I was rebelling against so much that I felt so constrained that I just straight out rebelled. I had very long hair, scruffy beard, had a physics major with my big pocket protector, everything that I was like a nerd in reveled in it, thought that was great. No, that's not the way we are at this stage of life. We discover instead a capacity to and a tolerance for not belonging and fitting in as we once did. Now, I'm not sure if any of us are ever healed from that completely. It still can be tough to be other, to be different, to not be accepted as we were, but we develop a tolerance for it. We enter seasons of life in which it's okay to be different, peculiar from what is expected by those in our groups. I like that picture of the green figure actually stepping out. Stepping out. And why? I put that other graphic in there to explore. Okay, I need to go beyond this. I need to look at what this, I'm going to read these other things. I'm going to explore with other people. This graphic, I saw this on Facebook. I don't know what the source of it is, but stop shrinking yourself to fit places you've outgrown. You know what I mean? How easy it is. And in the first half, in a sense, you shrink yourself because you need guidance. You need help figuring the world out. But in the second half, we expand beyond our need for that. We can question the norms and boundaries of people and groups that held strong sway in our life. And if we lose some influence and so on, that gets into the trans-egoic. It's okay. We can do that. We ask, why was conforming so important? Why is conforming today still so important? One reason that people leave churches is to expand beyond the boundaries of acceptable faith community, values, perspectives, beliefs, and should be behaviors. And again, if we find that we're stepping outside of the convention and churches might feel uncomfortable with it or try to correct us or with peer pressure, we can resist and question our development. We can pretend to be something else that we're not. We can be very good first half conventional adults in church and then go home and be in a different group. But I knew how to do that. I knew how to do that as a first half adult. When I was a pastor in a pastor's role, I could act very pastoral. When I was with my therapist, I could just let go and be a different person. But at this point in life, I'm weary of that. I want to be who I am wherever I am. We can openly live in churches as healthy, growing misfits. The closest I came to that was I was teaching a course on the meta-narrative, the whole Bible. And I would walk across campus with my Bible for Idiots book. And people looked at me like you're a pastor and you have a Bible for idiots? Yeah, because they put it very clearly. A lot of things I could learn from it. But I was a little bit marginalized by that. And then third, second half, trans warrior. While living in the first half, we often feel threatened by others. When challenged, we default to defending ourselves and our groups. There is something that we push back very, very quickly. Not only do we first half warriors fight external battles, but so much is internal battles. Paul's statement, although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. The good I want to do, I don't. The evil I don't want to do, that's the very thing I do. That is a strong first half statement. Just that battle that's going on constantly. We turn to God, important groups, counselors, fellow strivers for help. Churches are very helpful in that. Then, as we expand into adolescence and beyond, we don't lose our warrior capacity. Our warrior nature matures. And this was me playing with W's, by the way, so please bear with me. We become a weary warrior. We have less and less passion for being constantly on guard. We see less and less reason to engage in all these battles. I'm weary of the battles. Battles for more, battles to protect ourselves. We become warm, winsome warrior. I love putting that together. Now, for the first half, that would be maybe, how can that be both? A warm warrior, we experience compassion for even those who oppose our values and security. We see connection and mutuality between us and those that maybe we're fighting against. I have a book, I have it in a bibliography too, the handout that you'll receive, or you can pick it up here. It has quotes mystics and sages and so on from all the different faith traditions and from non-aligned folks and so on. And I read through their quotes And they all sound the same. And then I look at where they're coming from. This one is from Islam. This one is from Hindu. This one is from this one. And they're saying similar things. It's like we see connection. Those people that I used to say, we shouldn't listen to them because they're wrong. I'm finding connections that I never saw before. We're a wondering warrior. We wonder about our side as the supposed good and right ones. Those on the other side as the bad and wrong ones, along with the very effectiveness of the resulting win-lose situation. Wouldn't it be something if our politicians could do that? Wouldn't that be something to say? And I'm wondering why, or people that we elect and they vote 96, 97% with their party. It's like, I feel like we're a little bit unique here. We're not exactly like Detroit or Lansing. We have some unique ways. And we moved to California, we live there, and that's a whole different situation here, but vote the same because they're Republican or Democrat. It's like, And then we're well-worn, wizened warriors. You feel like that? Hopefully well-worn, wizened warrior. We ask, is this a fight worth engaging? If so, how might I do that? This feels like a battle. Must it be so? It's like the warrior, I think in terms of in my head, it shows the way I think. There's a council in my head. There's the warrior, there's the peacemaker, and so on. And earlier, the warrior was pretty close to up front a lot, had a lot of voice. Now the warrior is one of the council and is not the first to speak, is not the first. We don't pick up a sword right away. When first half warriors and churches see a battle forming, we may see it too, but we may just as easily see it as an unnecessary fight, one not worth engaging, or as something very different from a battle, be it that having to do with sexuality or so many other things. As first half warriors and churches draw up battle lines, we may be found on our side, between sides, on the other side, or on the sideline. And so, we're fighting this battle, but I fit more over there. Or I'm on the sideline. If Jesus didn't talk about it, why are we talking about it? It's like, or if the Holy Spirit talking about a certain language, if the Holy Spirit didn't figure it was worthwhile to put one verse in the Bible about this, why are we fighting over all this? What's going on? It's just not worth it. And when first half warriors are putting on armor and seeking to win others over, that could be an evangelism crusade, or we're going to go out and win people, or we're more seeking to understand and be converted ourselves as much as, or perhaps more than, trying to convert others. It's a whole different perspective. When I sit down with people from other faith systems, first thing I'm thinking, what can I learn? Okay, I'm going to sit here saying that Jesus is my primary example of who God is and what a life full of God looks like. And they might sit there and say, no, our primary example is this. And I want to learn. I've learned more about, I can say this honestly, in the past probably 10 years, I've learned more about following Christ in the way of Jesus by reading other faith systems than I have about reading the usual theology. They've taught me so much about that, how our way might be unique, how it might not be unique, how it's the same. So why are so many healthy, growing people leaving churches? Because we no longer naturally lined up and fight alongside other church warriors as quickly in as many battles and with as much passion, or even on the same side as before. So church might say, here's our position on sexual orientation. Here's our position on abortion. Here's our position on this, or who's saved and who's not saved. And we might say, I kind of don't sit on this side. It's hard to be accepted in a church or to feel comfortable with that. And then second half, trans-aspiration. By the way, I'm saving the interesting 3 for the end. Second half, trans-aspiration. First half adults have a propensity to strive, reach, yearn, become all that they can be. And they aspire for more, to become more, to achieve more, to make more of a difference. Is that bad? That's great. Great. People do that. They strive to make a difference. Now they can overstrive, but they strive to establish a strong identity, home, skills, and so on. Then as we live in half-adolescence, complementary transformations emerge. And I use this analogy. First of all, when I knew it was time to retire or move out of the church in the format I was in at the Crystal Cathedral, it felt like somebody had reached in someplace and opened a spigot and just drained a lot of the passion. I could still do it. I still taught classes. I still did the counseling. I still did the announcements. I still worked, whatever, 50, 60, 70 hours a week. But the passion, the drive wasn't there as much. It just, the idea of having more wasn't as important anymore. It's not that we no longer value making a difference and aspiring to things. We just choose to do that. And it's just that, a choice. We're not compelled. We're not driven to do that. Unless I'm in a church and I see something needs done. That's where my old first half aspiration kicks in. And I jump in that toilet and flush it. It's like, no, I have to be careful with that. Yeah, maybe someday. Second, a mysterious word grows in our heart and mind. Enough. Enough. It's enough. I talk to people that are, say, in midlife, in careers. Say, when will I know when it's time to retire? I said, you'll bump into something. You'll bump into it. I bumped into it at mid-50s. Anita bumped into it closer to 70. So you bump into it different times, but you just bump into it. It just becomes hard. It's often stunning to experience such a radical change in our sense of things. After years of expanding and maximizing, and words I loved, we increasingly sense that we have enough. In some cases, an excess of things, titles, roles. We're talking about lots of things, goals, hopes, finances, expectations. And relinquishment grows as a core value. One of the words that shows up over and over again in the mystic's writing is relinquishment. Surrender, lay down, turn over, release, let go. That's part of meditation. It's part of contemplative prayer. Letting go. Even those old, I call them my pet grudge. Let me show you my pet grudge. I keep it right in my pocket here. It's furry. And I pet it, take it out and pet it once in a while. There might be something that happened 20 years ago. It's an old pet grudge. And it purrs. And it's like tribbles and what is it? Star Trek. You know, they multiply and you get more. It's taking that pet grudge out and just letting it go. Just letting it go. Could be grudges, could be whatever. Expanding into trans-acquisition is not a shift from aspiration to non-aspiration. Again, that's one of the examples. Instead, our drive and need for more doesn't determine the trajectory of our life. Sabrina Fairchild, we love the film Sabrina. We like the newer one. But more isn't better. Sometimes it's just more. When she was talking to the other person, the male, she was that I forget what their name. Lionel. Anyway, the multi-millionaire, she was second half, he was first half. And by the end of the movie, he was more second half. So something was happening in his life as well. Trans-aspirational adults no longer have a driving need to aspire. Relinquishment becomes a core value. This may put them out of sync with aspiration-driven church leaders and members. And some of us leave. Then trans-external. A profound awakening happens in our lives as we enter half-adolescence. We become increasingly aware and curious about who we are and what's going on inside. Who is this person that's been seeing over these decades? What's with the mess inside of me? It's like our heart increasingly finds a voice and calls us inward. The picture I wrote it in my journal early in half-adolescence. It's like my heart was plastered against the wall with all the activity going on. And finally, the heart said, I need some space. It was time for a therapist. It was time for me to figure out what do I believe now that I'm not paid to believe anymore. What am I feeling? Where are all these things coming from? A still small voice, and some say a still small capital V voice, emerges in our awareness, calls us to listen, explore, and incorporate our inner life. So we turn inward. It's what we might have called in the early first half navel gazing. Just get past yourself, get that thing fixed, get back with the program. This kind of deep inner exploration experience has been mostly postponed because we're busy. I mean, Anita and I didn't have kids, but I try to imagine having career and kids to say, I'm going to spend a lot of time meditating and considering my inner life. Tough. We were fueled before by experiencing, exploring, and understanding things around us, meeting expectations. It was more than enough to keep us up and going. Second half, we're ready to explore beyond the secondary experiences of others and experience, this is from Merriam-Webster Dictionary of all places, a direct subjective communion with God, our ultimate reality. So we're ready to know God personally. Some authors talk about as thin place. It's great to study how other people experience God, but we're much more interested sometimes of saying a direct connection. We want to hear and obey a still small voice of the soul, a deeper voice of God. Hear that word, deeper. Deeper voice of God, deeper than other people, deeper than our church, deeper than a pastor, deeper than other influencers. We want to listen ourselves. We trust enough to listen to a deeper soul within. We're ready to experience deeper wonder, joy, and peace. And this is a picture I have. Change our center of gravity to our inner space and say, where do I operate from? Where do I make my decisions from? Increasingly from an inner space. And as we discover the inner life, a surprising and paradoxical truth emerges. Going inward is not a shrinking back from engaging the external world. It's not the same. I'm going to withdraw from the world and go internally. Rather, we engage the external world, but an expansion beyond who we are. All of life's connections are enriched by direct interaction from an inner space. When in second half adulthood, our hearing is cleared enough to hear the more subtle yearnings, wounds, and questions we've postponed. Only now can we hear and obey a still small voice of the soul, a deeper voice of God. I think about the churches that I was in, especially at the Crystal Cathedral with video and audio. We had a 4-second rule. You couldn't have more than 4 seconds of silence. So when I was at Trinity here in town, we were on the radio. And after 4 seconds, people started, what happened to my, so 4 seconds of silence was too much. In the second half of life, we yearn for silence. I looked for a church here in Southern California that had a meditation center. There's one between Holland and Zealand, the Buddhist. They have a meditation center. Or in Portland, Oregon, found a church that actually had a labyrinth in it. It's like, oh, that doesn't make any sense for a younger first half church, but looking for that silence so we can hear. We no longer naturally resonate with the noise, activity-oriented, and lack of silence in churches. We learn for understanding, for deep inner work. First half churches cannot meet this need. They feel uncomfortable with people honoring an inner voice. So, I was praying the other day, or I was meditating, and I kind of sensed that God was saying this. How does that match with what you're saying? Try that sometimes in the first half group. Say, but our policy says, our creed says, our convention says. And then trans group loyalty. Oh, it's so easy to look outside of ourselves and say politics. What happens when somebody votes against their party? Do they run again? Often not. Loyalty is very, very important. Whatever our circumstances and the choices we made, each of us probably joined and belonged in groups during our first half season of life. This could be work or certainly churches. Our identity was caught up in large part with the values, perspectives, and beliefs of those groups, and we served as loyal members, defending our groups, volunteering, giving money, all those things. Then as we enter our adolescence, our driving need to belong, defend, and advocate for our groups wanes and complexifies. their expectations, boundaries. We no longer feel as much need to live with them. The term I used, the boundaries that were there before, this is what's proper to believe and how we act, they turn more to vapor or have more ways to explore beyond. We question more and more whether the rightness and importance of our group compared to other groups still makes sense. We can see the strengths and weaknesses, the health and flaws of our groups. I mean, I'm doing that right now in our condo development. You know, we've lived in associations forever, so I just question some of the policies. I've learned it's time for me to be quiet. It's asking those questions is tough. The same thing in churches. Our earlier us versus them perspective dissolves, frees us to discover wisdom in other groups. We may even come to see all humankind as one group with all its richness and diversity. Groups and individuals strongly oriented to the first half loyalty cannot understand trans loyalty as anything but disloyalty. So a person who gets beyond the policies or the walking the line politically or in their church gets beyond, oh, you're disloyal. No, I'm transloyal. Good luck explaining that. So transloyal living is not for the faint-hearted. We can only try to understand and appreciate our own expansion, accept the reaction of others, and keep growing. Okay, let's go on for the last one. Trans ego. First half adulthood, we struggle to build a strong, healthy ego. Again, I worked at the Crystal Cathedral, self-esteem, very important to people, and had a strong following, and people resonated with it. We need to feel good about ourselves, feel like we're worth something in the eyes of others. We work hard to become someone we and others in our group can feel good about, someone we and others can respect. Boy, I put this in here, where my ego building process took me. So it wasn't just ego, but I didn't mind singing that, thinking, yeah, look pretty good with that Bible there and with the stole and so on. That was even before I had my doctoral stripes. And is that bad? Well, fortunately, I had people around me that kept me humble. So as soon as I would get in that robe and start strutting, somebody would stick out their foot and I'd fall. So it was very, very helpful. Richard Rohr, I don't know if I mentioned this last time or not, Richard Rohr said we should pray for one good humiliation every day. I've never done that, but I know what he means. I know what he means. Ego building can become egotistical. But then I bumped into half adolescence. Then when our first half adult life has done its work in us, when our mentors and groups, others around us have helped us form a good, solid ego, hopefully helpful, we mature into life with a stable, strong, and gentle ego. We no longer need to become more, have more, achieve more, and exert more. We can let go of things that propped up our sense of self-worth. It's not always easy. Titles, impressive stuff, authority, influence, strong opinions, and busyness. We can let that go. We can relinquish it. It's not always easy, as I said. I remember the first time after I retired at the Crystal Cathedral, when I'd be with other people and they found, oh, you're at the Crystal Cathedral. They listened. Then I came to Holland and the classes, and I said, well, we haven't done it that way. And they all went, oh, well, we do. That was it. My ego bled for a while until I could let it go and say, this is good. This is good. Franciscan priest Richard Rohr calls those of us with a healthy, built-up ego, holy fools. Holy fools. I love that term. I didn't put that in the whole list, but he would look around and say, look at this group of holy fools. And that for him is a compliment. Talks about men, God's beloved son, the mellow grandfather. Being human is more important than self-image, role, power, prestige, or possessions. Such a person, such a male can lead, partner, or follow when necessary. He has it all. Isn't that a great list? Lead, follow, partner. Women, God's beloved daughter, the biblical strong woman. She can live with compassion and forgiveness. She does not need to punish or shame. As the ultimate mature feminine, She can lead, partner, or follow when necessary. She has it all. She has been there. I hope you can read that and say, yeah, I feel that. I feel that. Okay, so these are the growing beyond first half boundaries into second half adulthood. And I put this, if your own reason and experience confirms, I didn't know it was confirm or confirms. Who are the English people here? Should there be an S on confirm? 50-50, so I did okay. I didn't know. If your own experience and reason confirms what these 7 expansions describe, then you may very well have entered or are being invited into the season of second half adulthood, if there's some resonance. I've seen some horizontal lines on foreheads, which means, and I've seen some vertical ones, which means, I wonder. So just look at it. That makes sense. You may very well be maturing into what people have called, and I'll call you this, you may be becoming a mystic, sage, elder, guru, saint, enlightened, wizard, witch, heretic, self-actualized one, wise, superconscious, inter-individual, autonomous, fully developed second half adult. You just might be. Then the options, challenges, and potentials. And again, those 7 really, it's like looking into a jewel from 7 different facets. It's very similar, but they're different ways of expressing it. Where to from here for people leaving churches and churches being left? First of all, let's look at some frequently asked questions. Why have only 10 to 20% of us matured into half-adolescence? Why only 20% that own it and live into it? First of all, we're living longer than people did before. And it takes a while to grow into this. So if people, if the average lifespan is 40 or 50, there's hardly enough time to do that. So we have more time of relative health, more time after the busyness. So we have that advantage. And it can be arrested. I'd say for 80 to 90% is arrested by self-doubt. People say, what's wrong with me? Why am I thinking these thoughts? Peer pressure? Oh my, don't go there, stay here. Just come back. That's where the term, when people, it irritates me when people say, churches say, we want to learn how to bring our older people back. Don't bring us back. Grow forward to meet where we are today. It's a whole different perspective. Ignorance. Most of us don't know that growing beyond the values of our churches and so on is not only possible, but natural and spirit empowered, that it's okay to do that, and lack of models, support, and community. We're in that in-between time. There are people among us that are growing. I think that's where HASP community can be helpful, because more of us are in that stage, but many people lack those models and community. And we talked about this before. Adolescence phase is in around the time we enter our teens. When can a person expect to become a half-adolescent? The peak of that bell curve I put around midlife, what many call midlife crisis, which isn't often true. For half-adolescents, it's not as clear. Wouldn't it be something if there was a half-adolescent hormone? Something that kicked in and they could take a blood sample and go to the doctor and says, oh, look, you're a half-adolescent, or you're switching, or there's some sort of like Enneagram type test that you could take and say, oh, you're now here. There's some therapists that might say that, but many do not. We enter half-adolescence when we've gained enough experience and maturity, when we've lived into the 7 first half characteristics, when we experienced them and gone through the challenge, when we sense a deep inner invitation of the Spirit of wisdom to open our heart, when we're ready to face and overcome those influences in our life that might arrest our development. I'm ready to face them, and we're ready to say yes to internal promptings. So it's different. It's different. Now, there might be some people that they receive language and say, oh, for me, I was struggling with what was going on. Then I came back here and hooked up again, re-engaged my therapist, because he had worn out meditation mats. He knew developmental theory, and he talked to me and says, oh, here, read this, or let's talk about that. Say, you're healthy, you're growing. Finally, I could breathe and say it's okay. And I could become stranger, more peculiar. It was okay because he told me how to do that. Do the 7 expansions happen all at once? I believe that we normally sense the invitation to 1 or 2 expansions before the others, sometimes way before. So 1 or 2 might lead it, but when we say yes to 1 expansion, it prompts the others or gives permission to the others. If we can say, hey, I no longer have to see everything as right or wrong, in or out, up or down, then we can step beyond convention more easily. We can question the group loyalty. We can move others. So 1 might move us. 1 or more expansions may lag, being arrested by some of those things from first question. It may require deeper expansion into other areas and a change of environment to help us. It's interesting that Anita and I, over the last years of her life, every time we moved, it was 2,200 miles between here and Southern California. We bounced back. Our poor cats, whenever they saw those cages coming out, they went nuts because everything was like a 5-day trip. But in a sense, it helped us relaunch because we had a new setting, a new friendships and so on. So it kind of broke us loose. And sometimes that helps us to move beyond. Is living the expanded second half life better than living in the first half? That can also be often be implied in our language. Like I grew beyond. I grew into the 4th and 5th season of life rather than only the 3rd season of life. Is it better? No. It would make little sense to say somebody who's in adolescence is better than somebody in elementary school. That doesn't make any sense. They are where they need to be. So in a sense, are we second halfers better somehow than somebody who's even arrested in first half? No, but yes, teenagers have encompassed and expanded beyond the potentials and perspectives of toddlers. The world is bigger, they contribute more to it. Teenagers can care for and help toddlers thrive and continue to grow. So no, but yes. Adults and half-adolescents and second half adults have expanded their worlds beyond and included the potentials and perspectives of first half adults. Their world is bigger. We can contribute more to our world. We can care for and help adults. That's one of the reasons, somebody mentioned it after class, it's one of the reasons for second half adults to try to stay engaged in their first half churches, to care for first half adults, make sure that their ego building doesn't become egotistical. Making sure that either certainty is soft form of it. And then sometimes when adults are ready for and have received an invitation, yeah. And when their external factors allow them to, I'm not saying that everybody has to move in. There are some contexts where it would just be too painful. I think about my dad. He was second half toward the end of his life. I mean, he grew up in Overijssel Reformed Church, so he knew all the texts. And shortly before his death, he and I were talking. And rather than talk about the mansion in heaven or the room in mansion, he just very quietly said, boy, this is going to be exciting. This is going to be absolute mystery. Just what this next stage after death, what will I see? And I think my dad said that. It's like, wow, he was just wondering. He was open to any kind of wonder. That was the question marks and exclamation points. But did he share that in his church? No, it just didn't make any sense because that was all his friendships. And I would have been, I don't know, 6th or 7th generation in that church if I'd been able to hang in there with it. So sometimes, doesn't have to be. Should everyone make these 7 expansions? No. I think it's built into our DNA. I feel sad when someone has been invited, but somehow they haven't been able to move into it. But I recognize that it needs to be that last one. I encourage everyone to expand into these 7 arenas of later faith and life development as they are invited, that their whole health supports, spirit empowers, and context allows. Okay, grace. I don't say everybody who's over 70 years old should be. No, I don't know their situation. It's messier than that. It's more complex than that. Why is it so challenging for churches to hold and support? I want to bring in that first sentence, a developmental principle that applies to faith and life, so that it is difficult, often impossible for us to accept, honor, and support the values, perspectives, beliefs, and behaviors of those who are in phases of development beyond where we presently live. Very, very challenging for a first half of life person. Some would say impossible for them to appreciate in any kind of depth where we're living from. It's not that they choose to back off, they cannot. Why do some half-adolescents and second half adults continue to participate in churches while others struggle or leave churches? I've thought about that so much. It may have to do with the local church. So you might stay because the local community has a broader tolerance for diversity of values, perspectives, beliefs, and behaviors. Is it perhaps willing to love the person, even if not their ways? There might be some churches that are more open to diversity than others. That might keep you there. Are there one or more leaders that have entered half-adolescence and second half adulthood? There's a church in Grand Rapids Presbyterian Church, I won't say which one, but he is a subversive second halfer. He's a second half pastoring in a first half church. And he talks about how challenging that is. But he keeps inviting people, he keeps slipping things in, he's very subversive, he keeps finding ways to bring that in. Rob Bell did very well for a number of years. Or is there a small, often underground group of half-adolescents and second halfers in that church? You say, yeah, the whole church, I don't know, but I've got this group that I've belonged to forever. We get together and we drink wine and we talk about all kinds of things. Okay, maybe that would hold you there. It may have to do with personality of the half-adolescent. I'm taking the Enneagram. I happen to be a 5. I'm very head type. I'm driven by intellect. So I think about everything. I make choices and evaluations based on analysis, interpretation of things. Makes me a little harder to stay in a church because I'm always thinking things through, trying to. Our heart types, for example, are driven by their emotions and their desire to connect with other people. They're driven by a strong sense of empathy and knowing what people are experienced. My experience is that people with Enneagram 2, 3, 4 are able to stay in a church longer than I am. And it may have to do with how important a church is to the person. Is there a great motivation to stay there? Well, my family is all there. Or this is where I have all these memories. This is where my friends all are. Might prompt somebody to stay. So where to from here for those of us in half-adolescence and second half adulthood who no longer fit as we once did? First, understand and appreciate the lifelong growth that has prompted your loss of resonance with churches. Remember, nothing is broken. No one needs to be fixed. It's a healthy, growing church. They have an ongoing ministry. They probably served you well for much of your life. I know for some of you, I've talked that they didn't always do that well. There are wounds. And so whenever you get together with a community of people, there are going to be wounds. Some of you were wounded pretty deeply, but in generally, healthy, vital churches are doing a good job. They're doing what they do. They're reaching a lot of people. Family church, I've looked at that one. That's growing, exploding. I don't fit there at all. Therefore, they need to be fixed. No, they're meeting needs. Or Founders Church. I really don't fit there. I just don't. But they're meeting people's needs. And I have grown beyond the capacity of churches to understand where I'm coming from. Do I need to be fixed? No, I need to mature. I certainly am not perfect. I'm always maturing, but no. And honor your grieving process. The 5 stages of grief. When you leave a church or move beyond groups, there's denial. It's like, this is just unreal. There must be something strange going on. Bargaining, anger, depression, acceptance, loss of connection and resonance. Loss of resonance is a necessary aspect of growth. It's just part of it. Make room for it. Accept that you are changing and no longer fit as comfortably in first half churches as you once did. Let it be so. I love the words of St. Julian of Norwich. I have this on my wall. All will be well, and all manner of things will be well. All will be well. Now, sometimes I sit in my chair early in the morning and I read the newspaper, then I look at that and say, Julian, you're wrong. But all will be well. Let it be so. Search out understanding, appreciation, and support for your ongoing half-adolescent and second half growth. I remember when I launched into writing dissertation for D-Min, I was totally lost because before I was always handed a reading list, write this report, do this, and then it says, okay, write a dissertation. What's my topic? You decide. How long must it be? Somewhere in here to here. How many footnotes do I need? A lot. It's like I spent probably 2 years just figuring out what the topic was going to be. I had to take responsibility for my own growth and learning. I had to accumulate a group of advisors to help me get it written properly and so on. Church programming was designed to support your growth until half-adolescence. You could simply engage in your programming. That would be like, okay, we're now half-adolescents and second half church. Okay, there's 32nd Reformed or Christian Reformed or Presbyterian over there. Go there and they'll hand you a reading list and it's not the way it works for us. A shift has occurred. When you grow beyond church programming, you must search out, learn, and engage fresh practices and community. That doesn't mean you're starting from scratch. See the footprints? People have been through this. People have left footprints, but we have to search for them. Watch for other half-adolescents and second half adults. Remember, 1 in 10 is a candidate. When you look around in your neighborhood, and in our neighborhood, our little condo development, I'm finding about 1 in 3 resonates with what I'm saying. So we're kind of a radical group. So where possible, nurture a relationship. Search out mentors, teachers, and models. This could be through books, courses, seminars, the web, local group, neighbors, and other church. Develop fresh, season-appropriate practices. Decide whether to remain engaged in churches or leave churches behind. Think about why you might stay in a church. Sunday morning services still meet at eat. I remember when the Roman Catholic Church went from the Latin liturgy, and I was at the cathedral where a number of people would go to their Catholic church first, then come to the hour of power service. How much they grieved that they didn't have their services in Latin. I said, because you understand it? I have no idea what they're saying, but they loved the service. They loved the rhythm of it. They loved the music. They loved everything of the liturgy following all the way through. So might still meet a need. You find satisfying relationships there. So that's where you found your friendships. A support or affinity group that still meets a personal need. And say, yeah, but if I left the church, I wouldn't be as engaged with that group that's so important to me. You find other half-adolescents, second half adults there, or there are ways for you to serve as an effective second half presence. Say, I'm making a difference. Then consider reasons to leave. First of all, lost resonance. Your heart and mind just don't connect as they did before. You go through a service and see the creeds, you hear the music and so on. It just doesn't resonate anymore. The church community is holding you back from lifelong growth. You might feel that, which means it might be a sabbatical or it might be leaving churches behind. And then that dissonance. Participation in churches feels dissonant to you. And your participation in church might feel dissonant to the church as well. Merriam-Webster calls dissonant, discordant, incongruous, psychologically conflicting. Sit there and you just get irritated. It's like, what's going on? Nothing's broken. Nobody's needs fixing. It just, you sit there and the music rasps a little bit. Whether to stay or leave, do so graciously with a sense of gratitude. If you stay in a church, do so graciously. Just say, I don't quite fit here. The values, perspectives don't resonate with me. If you decide to stay, do so graciously. And if you leave, do so graciously. It's very easy to say, I'm leaving because this church is doing this, this, and this, rather than just graciously saying, it just doesn't fit where I am anymore. It's not like, yeah, you just can't meet my needs because you're too young or you're too first half, or no, just graciously leave with a smile. Thank them for their service in your life. Appreciate, celebrate what they've done, and by the way, the last one, don't see leaving churches, small C churches behind as leaving the church. Those of us who are de-churched are still part of the church. Hear the difference? I'm still part of the church. I'm just not attending an organized church. And potential ways for churches to expand into second half ministries. What about the churches? What might they do in the future? First of all, discover and explore well-researched church participation statistics. I can tell I'm running out of time, so I'm talking too fast. So churches could look at statistics. What is actually happening? I remember when I was here before at Trinity, first time that over 50% of the people in Holland were unchurched. So just look at that and say, here's the reality of what's happening. If they could expand their vision of lifelong growth to include 5 seasons, just say, this is happening. I don't understand it. It irritates me. But look at it. Shift from looking for ways to bring back healthy growing participants to ways to expand ministry to include healthy growing second half participants. Churches could do that. Target the demographic of healthy growing people who have been leaving healthy, vital churches. We actually had somebody come to our condo, pastor from Ski Slope Church, Maranatha. Okay, Maranatha, and said that's a retired pastor, and says, "Hey, we're reaching out. Are you church?" And I said, "No, we're not." Well, what are you looking for? So I explained a little bit what I was looking for. He got very quiet and left, and I haven't heard anything since. Because just didn't understand. They didn't understand the first two, so it was hard for them to target me and say, who are these healthy people, 1 in 3 that are living here? How might we reach out to them? Secure a leader or core to launch a countercultural second half oriented ministry. Find ways to live as 5 yet 1. Sounds like marriage, doesn't it? 2 yet 1. But it's like, how do we live with 5 different groups? Sometimes I think it would be like the old airport where you had the center hub and then 5 different airlines. Already have a children's department. Already have increasingly a youth department or student ministry that has its own worship services and everything else, especially in the mega churches. And then you have the mainline first half adult. How would it be if we had another hub or 2 hubs for half adolescents and second half adult? They're too weird to be right with us, but we have somebody, we have a core, we found a pastor that can actually reach out to them. And then can't do that individually, honor and support healthy growing people who are leaving. So rather than condemn them or get all weird about it, just say affirm and encourage their continued growth. As possible, refer them to a second half faith community and ministry. Wouldn't it be something if we could? And then denominationally, work with other churches as a denomination to imagine, plan, and plant second half communities and ministries. So wouldn't it be something if the Holland classis or Zeeland classis or Synod of the Great West or whatever it is, Great Michigan area, pardon? Synod of the Great Lakes, if they said, we're going to find ways to plant ministries and groups for second half adults. And we found somebody who's willing to come in and help us do that. I'm going to keep breathing rather than holding my breath, but then a few final notes. I have not found a local church that understands, appreciates, and supports my season of lifelong growth. I have not. 2 class participants since last week suggested Holland UCC. Anita and I participated online Sunday morning, and we are curious. We're curious, so we'll check that one out. We'll give it a try, which is interesting because we keep looking. We keep wondering. We'd love to be part of a community. Any other suggestions? United Church of Christ. They're on. Pardon? Okay, there's one in Douglas as well, but that's on 14th Street. It's interesting to watch their service. It was very more informal, but the pastor said some things that connected with me. I learned some things. I wondered about some things, and I liked that they had a foosball thing behind him, and they had something else. And when the music started, he actually walked over to the camera and turned it himself. You know, I love that informality. It wasn't a show, so we're intrigued by that. We'll probably visit once or twice just to see. This has possibilities, and I believe we'd have to go regularly for a couple 3 months just to find out. to really see if it fits or not. So we're curious. Yes.
We have one comment from the chat, suggesting Parkwood Presbyterian in Jenison.
Okay. Parkwood Presbyterian. Remember that? Anita has mine like a steel trap. Mine's like a leaky sieve. Okay. Isn't that something? You think we could have 42 of them in this group, but it's challenging. If you think of one, email me and I'll forward it. If local churches do not provide support for your growth, where do we look? Some resources I use, the Center for Action and Contemplation, CAC. It's an online with Richard Rohr. I've used that a great deal. I'm like right now, I'm taking a course in the Wisdom School. So taking a video course. So there are different ways to go about it. I decidedly unorganized group of second half friends, neighbors, family, and carefully chosen Facebook friends. My Facebook friends, I look for folks that gracious first halfers are great. I love seeing their cats and all that kind of stuff. But I also have the subset within Facebook of people who are in second half and are searching. So I found some help, and I like to read. So a lot of published mentors, teachers, and models. I'm one of these weird ducks that gets up at 3 a.m, or my cat Tess gets me up at 3 a.m. because she's hungry. So I'm up from 3 to 5, and I sit and I read, and I have all these mentors and so on. But I'm weird that way. I'm a 5. Why might someone who is de-churched and has expanded beyond churches pay attention for ways to re-engage? Why do Anita and I? Part of it might be tradition, rhythm, heart yearning. I just want to belong. And this is from Benedictine tradition, because I do value the fourfold balance of praying, that is meditating, inner work. When I talk about exercise, I mean like yoga or Tai Chi. It's not exercise. We go to MVP and do all the strength training, which half kills us. But that's not the kind of exercise I'm talking about here, that we're praying in terms of yoga, or praying in terms of Tai Chi, that quiet, physical, but the contemplative side of things, doing so alone and together. So those are two different ways. We pray or have silence or walk through labyrinths or sit on meditation mats together, which I've never done. I have never actually sat with a whole bunch of people and say, we're going to go through our prayer beads or meditation beads together. It would be fascinating. People recommend it over and over again. And then there's the work, service, earth care, justice, activism, again, alone and together. That's the fourfold: prayer, alone and together; work, alone and together. So I keep looking for a church, partially because I know, especially as Enneagram or an introvert, Enneagram 5, that I tend to pull back in myself. It's very important that as often as possible, we're actually sitting in the class rather than watching virtually. It's somehow learning with, working together. So, end of presentation. Questions or handouts for 4 and 5 here. There'll also be emailed to you. Yes.
So one question from the chat. Are you familiar with the group Interfaith Power and Light?
No, I am not. Anybody else? Something to explore. Anita will write that one down. She might forget that. Coming right behind you.
I think it's so interesting. I think it's so interesting to talk to other people who have had, excuse me, a faith journey, and how that developed, why it develops. And so just having a group to talk to about, you started out so conservative and now you're so liberal, and why, what caused that?
Yeah. I
was raised in Holland as a Methodist, so I was an outcast.
Oh.
And I'm English, not Dutch.
Oh, see, you had some advantages to going counter.
So, but then I married a Reformed Church minister.
Oh, then you were in.
So then now I'm just struggling. I have more questions than I have answers, so, and I think a lot of people are there. It's just interesting to talk to.
Yeah, and it's one, I understand that feeling because I share it, it's confusing because I have all these questions. Or another way of saying it is, I'm growing because I have all these questions, and say, I love the questions. If there's something to ponder and somebody's giving answers to it, I tend to tune them out. Let's sit with the questions. Let's just sit with them.
I have the mic.
Oh, okay. Okay, got it.
I just wanted to know the name of the book that you referenced with quotes from people of different faiths.
Okay. I'll make sure I get the words right. It'll be on the sheet for a short bibliography. But it is The Essential Mystics, Poets, Saints, and Sages. The Essential Mystics, Poets, Saints, and Sages. A Wisdom Treasury.
I'm over here. with the
Okay.
mic. I just was going to say that I've seen it within churches, two different groups that I know of. One in California where my father-in-law was a member. What were they? What was their denomination, honey? Were they disciples of Christ? Anyhow, but they had a group of these older people mainly who called themselves the Seekers. They met on Sunday mornings. They read their own book list that they selected and chose, and it kept them really happy within the church. And they were kind of that oddball group that everybody kind of laughed about maybe, but tolerated very nicely, and it kept him happy for many years. We were at one time part of a Presbyterian church, and it was a women's group that we had, and we met and was a book group. And we were kind of the oddballs there too. We used to call ourselves the Wild Women of Grace.
I love that.
But eventually we were asked that we not take up the room because we were too far out.
Okay, sure.
So, but eventually, that was okay. We moved to the community college and we survived there.
Mhm.
Then we were in Madison, Wisconsin, and we were part of a lifelong learning community. And I'm saying this because I think HASP could take this role. And a retired pastor, we loved him so much, named Jim. He had a group. We talked about books. He would pick one of these books, like the kind of thing you're talking about. And you couldn't get into that class because he would try to cut it off at 20 or 25. So it could be a discussion group and not a lecture group.
Yeah.
But there were so many people who wanted to be in that class that you could hardly manage it. So what I'm saying is there's a real hunger for this. And I think discussion groups, a book group, something that guides a discussion is a way to go. And I think HASP might be a good place to do it. That's all.
Okay. See, there's hope. There are examples out there, but I don't see them published very much.
One other comment. Are you familiar with Mark Nero and Barbara Brown Taylor?
Yes, I don't think I have a piece from Nero, but I have one from Barbara. So yes, I've read both of them quite extensively. There are authors out there that speak of it. Yes, one right there.
This is a question about Torah's class. I have not taken the first Enneagram class. Would you recommend it's okay to be at the second without knowing anything about the first, or is it too late?
I would say come.
Okay,
And
I'll sign up.
And you might even check with the staff here because there were a couple of handouts. So ask them to send you the handouts that were mailed out. She's asking about the Enneagram. Well, thank you. Thank you for engaging. You're encouraging. Appreciate it. And somebody asked where to from here for this group. I'm not sure yet. No, I'll think about it. I will think about it. So you might see something, hey, let's get together and just talk about stuff. But we'll see.
list of your